Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we're offering an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am Brian Black, joined by Robert Henderson.
Hello.
Today we are going to talk skills, and by skills, the thing that we're going to go over is the top 10 skill sets that we feel are important and that we advocate here on ITS. So we're going to kind of take them line by line. I've tried to rank these a little bit from like a 1 to 10. So we'll, go over. I guess we're going to start at 10 and work our way to 1. I think is probably
like
a good
countdown.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, like a top 100
Letterman countdown.
Casey Kasem. Okay, so and I really do. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of skills that we advocate on ITS, and this is not all encompassing. But this is, if we were to distill this down to 10, that I think everybody should pay attention to and know and practice on a regular basis. I really do feel like these would be the top 10. So if you guys have comments and things like that on these, or you have suggestions of what you would feel, is not in the right place or is something that could be substituted for that, please leave them in the comments. If you're watching the YouTube video for this podcast, you can leave them there. Or you can head over to itstactical.com where we post the episodes there, and there's a comment thread on the actual article itself too. So anyway, without further ado, number 10 is lockpicking. So I say lockpicking, but really I would say that it's more of a knowledge of how locks work, not necessarily the skill of picking quite itself.
I think it's for the benefit that you get by knowing how to pick a lock to protect yourself better.
Right, and I mean, it allows you to know what locks are good, what locks are more secure. It really kind of opens your eyes to the illusion of security, like I like to say all the time. So, and that illusion of security means that, most people think that, I have a lock on my front door, I've got one on my back door, the garage is shut, I'm good. That's my security. Some people have alarm systems. That's good too. But just getting into that mindset of knowing how to pick a lock kind of gives you that skill of learning how a lock works and knowing what to get to better protect your family. So I won't spend a lot of time on this one, but I also kind of lump thinking like a criminal in with this, even though that's more mindset related, and we can talk about that as we get to that specific topic. But I think that it kind of involves this a little bit, which is why I wanted to talk about it. Because while it says lockpicking, and that's kind of our way of stating this number 10, even home security kind of ties into this too, and that's more the philosophy that I like to kind of talk about when we talk about lockpicking. And obviously, knowing how to pick a lock is a very cool skill. It'll save you if you ever lock your keys in your house or, something like a car too, because that's something to learn as well. I mean, we just talked on, what was that, the question on the last podcast where we talked about, somebody wanted to know what to do if, to open a car if they saw a baby trapped inside or something.
Yeah,
and,
just any legal reason for one to enter.
Which, just to put this out there, I would break the window and get in there as quickly as I could if something like that was happening. But at any rate, that's kind of where we're going with lockpicking as a whole. You have anything to add on that?
No, I think like you said, I think that it shows the illusion of security. I think people think what you have to break is that mental barrier of how secure a lock is in your head. A lot of people, I think, lock their front door and they're like, okay, I'm good.
Yep.
It's like, no, you're not. You need to do layered approach, like you said, because it does show you. I always like showing people for the first time because they're just like, wow, I had no idea that it was that easy. And there are some locks that are much more difficult, but for the most part, your standard pin and tumbler lock comes apart pretty quick.
Well, and I think also, not to drag this out too long, but one more thing I want to add, because I can't talk about this without talking about it. Just because you have a lock, if you really drill down to the basics of what a lock is. Even if you go with a higher security lock, and it has a higher throw, meaning like the length of throw of the deadbolt is longer, so it goes into the door jamb further. You're still susceptible to a door being kicked in too. So sure. I think that it kind of shows you that, because the more you understand how a lock works and functions, you realize that all that's standing in between your home and a criminal that wants to get in is that little bar from the deadbolt.
It's a lot smaller.
Yeah, your door jamb splits pretty damn easy with a well-placed kick. But and there's things that protect against that too. All right, so moving on, knot tying would be number 9. That's certainly a skill that we talk about a lot here. Obviously, we have a knot of the week that we go through right now. We're kind of building a DIY knot tying display board as we go through some of the knots that we've done before. But I really think that it's one of those skills that is very, I say depreciable, but that's not the right word. It's a use it or lose it.
Yeah.
And I go back and practice a lot of knots too. And I got asked the other day, someone said, do you actually know all those knots that you tie all the time? And I said, I don't know every single one of them, but a large majority of them I do know by heart. Like I can tie them no problem. I probably know in the realm of somewhere, I don't know, maybe 80 knots, 75, 80 knots probably that I have in my, my mind, in my bank or so to use when I need to. And really, it's not just about being able to tie a knot, but it's about understanding the application and knowing which knot to use at what time.
Yep.
Because I think that's where the skill really comes in handy in daily life, because just because you can tie a knot, it doesn't do you any good unless you understand where to use it,
right?
And things like that too. So
I think a lot of it is like math formulas.
Yeah.
Like you may not have it memorized, but a quick refresh if you've already done it before and practiced it, you're right back into it. So of those 80 that you know, there may be a bunch more that you don't know, but after a quick look, it's like, oh yeah, now I remember that.
Yeah.
It brings it all back.
Yeah, I agree. It's very much like that. Just like you said with formulas, you at least know enough to know what to search for to get the answer you desire. Yeah. I just think knot tying is such a cool skill too.
I use it way more than I thought I would.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I probably use it, if not 3 to 4 times a week, maybe every day sometimes. It depends on what I'm doing. And, I regularly have things that I tie down, not only in my vehicle, but I'm trying to think. Yeah, at home too. So a perfect example is we have a bird feeder at home we take down to clean, and that's knots. And, we take that down on a very regular basis. But, I know what knot to tie there so that it doesn't come undone, and I don't have to even worry about it because it's always there. So anyway, that's kind of what this is about too. Daily principles behind these skills too. So it's not just, I just know these skills and I'm going to be good if whatever happens, the end of the world happens. But these are skills that can be used every day. This is
it's
not
like why
just
they're in the top 10.
Yeah, this is not just a, end of the world scenario kind of skill. Like these are skills that you would use every day potentially. So that takes us to number 8, which is navigation. Very important, in my opinion, to understand how to not only read a map, and that goes for like a road atlas too, not just a map to navigate the park that you're hanging out in with your family, or a nav course that you're running. I know scouts do. They kind of have a way of playing games with navigation, which I really like. And, if you have kids, this is a great way to teach them that too, set up points and have them understand how to walk a bearing and shoot a bearing and things like that. Yeah.
Just from finding a stake in the woods. Yeah. Like, this is amazing.
No, it's amazing. Yeah. And, that goes back to kind of some of the stuff we do at Muster too, that's one of the things I love is watching people get the skill and find a point, and they're just like, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it really is. It's like using something that is non-existent, and there's power in being able to find your way like that. So that's map and compass to me. I mean, I'm not only knowing how to set declination, understand walking a bearing and things like that, reverse azimuth, but all those things are so important. I mean, even understanding the MGRS system is important too, because I think that's a great way to utilize topographical maps that you can get and that are in ready supply at most
tons
outdoor
of places
stores.
to get them.
Yeah, and online. So, and then that takes us to fire building, and I think fire building is a very important skill.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that is not an everyday use scenario. However, when you really need to build a fire, you need to build a fire.
Yeah.
So
nothing else takes its place.
yeah, I agree. You can have heaters all day long, and if you don't understand the principles of fire building or the fire triangle, like heat, fuel, and oxygen, you'll never be able to build a good fire because you don't understand how those things work, or you're not prepping ahead of time and getting your tinder, kindling, and fuel laid out so that you're ready to go with that kind of stuff. So those are the applications that are fairly easy to remember that you can hold in your memory bank and use them if you need to. It's not something you necessarily need to practice all the time, but a good refresher every once in a while never hurt anybody.
And
for
having
fire
that
building.
knowledge, like with lock picking, it's just knowing how it is supposed to work helps you to do it if you ever really needed to. But yeah, I find myself trying to get at least a brush up once a month or so to start a fire, even in the summer.
You don't want to be the guy at a campsite using a pile of leaves and a jet boil to get something started. So anyway,
don't be that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that takes us to self-reliance, and I felt like that was a good descriptor for, really it kind of involves camp skills, like building a shelter, understanding where to set up your shelter or your tent so that, if rain falls, you're not going to, get flooded out.
Yep.
You understand, and really kind of knots play into this too. I mean, knots are kind of a big part of self-reliance because you're typically rigging things with paracord or some type of tent fly. You need to tie a taut line hitch or something like that. So really, self-reliance is just being able to kind of live off the land, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like I'm alone.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah. And I hate to use the word survival, so I don't really call it that. I mean, yes, if you really had to use those things, that's what kind of situation you'd be in. However, I feel better saying self-reliance because it is something you can use and practice on a regular basis.
Yeah, you don't have to be in a survival situation to tie up a shelter correctly.
And again, this is a great thing to bring kids in on the loop, which why I feel Boy Scouts is so important and Girl Scouts too, is they teach stuff like that, and it's one of the few organizations that still kind of has those things in it. Which if you look at most of these things that we're going to talk about, Scouts does a lot of that. It's not everything, but there are quite a few things that are here that the Scouts teach too. So,
and it's super empowering, even if they're not going to use tying up a rain fly or anything. It's still nice to know that you have the ability to do it. It gives you that accomplishment.
Yep. Then we come to first aid, and first aid is kind of another umbrella type phrase that we have for this skill. And I would put understanding traumatic bleeding and how to stop bleeding is important too. So knowing how to pack a wound and understanding pressure dressings and things like that. That's a huge skill that I think not enough people know.
I don't think people are ready for it.
Yeah,
and it happens.
And carrying a tourniquet on a regular basis, and knowing that can be a first resort. That it's not going to mean they lose their limb. The myths behind some of the principles like that, and understanding that if I carry something purpose built for stopping bleeding, I don't have to use my belt and potentially fail in that. So
you might be able to improvise, but you don't want to have to improvise.
Correct.
You shouldn't paint yourself into a corner.
Yeah, understanding improvisation is great, but relying on quality products is even better.
Yeah.
So, and then first aid. You can get that kind of training from a lot of different places. On the actual first aid scale, there's there's American Heart Association, like CPR kind of falls in with this too. Red Cross does a lot of first aid classes like this as well. And then you kind of get into the trauma side of things, and there's a lot of trainers now thankfully, that are doing stuff like that, like Caleb at Lone Star Medics, and that's like our local resource because I know he teaches classes here in the area. But find a quality trainer that knows what they're talking about, and learn that stuff. Because the other thing too is CPR principles change on a regular basis. They're always getting updated, and you kind of have to stay up to date on that. And then that brings us to kind of a self-defense / combatives skill. And so I like to say self-defense / combatives because I really do feel like it's more self-defense related. Yes, you need to know how to defend yourself, and that having that skill and understanding that application is empowering because and the reason I put this so close to first aid is, you really need to know how to save a life as well as take it if you're
Sure.
in that kind of situation where you're in that dangerous situation where you're protecting your family or something happens. Like you have to understand both of those, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that self-defense always involves combatives or fighting. Sometimes
or a firearm. It's just
sometimes you could do good self-defense by walking away, just leaving a situation, or being aware of what you're walking into so that you can say, no, this isn't safe, let's get out of here, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, just to throw something out with this skill, the thing that I've remembered forever is buddies, weapons, and options. You're looking for, who you have on your side, who are your buddies to help, or what buddies do the person attacking you have, where else is the threat coming from? Weapons, meaning what do you have at your disposal? What can be improvised? What do they have at their disposal? What can be improvised on their side? And then options, meaning, where's your out? Or do you have an evacuation point? Do you have something you can move to? Do you have cover?
Yeah.
So, all those things really come into that as well. But, I mean, firearms is lumped in with this, but, there's a very big draw and want for firearms training in this industry, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying that a lot of people put a lot of focus onto that skill, and it kind of goes back to the if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. And,
absolutely.
People carry a gun, but they don't think about things like self-defense or self-reliance or that type of deal. So just understanding that, and this kind of ties into where we're going for number one too. So I'll hold off on the rest of that until we get there.
Won't spoil it.
Yeah, and then number 3. So self-defense combatives is number 4. Number 3 is physical fitness, because I absolutely think that's something that gets neglected so much in terms of overall skill and and what you need to be able to do in an emergency situation, because you have to know that you can walk X number of miles. You have to understand if I'm going to carry a pack or I'm going to walk with my family, everybody can make this journey, or I can save myself by getting over this wall in an emergency situation. So I just think that it's really important, and that's why I have it as number 3. I just think it's something that
Definitely.
that I think is extremely important. And I'm not saying you have to be a bodybuilder or hit the gym every day either. That's not what that means. It just means that you have a level of fitness that comes along with being able to get yourself out of a situation you may find yourself in. So
I think a lot of it is knowing the limitations too.
Yeah,
we've talked before about, like you said, how far can you walk with that pack? This pack that you've assembled that's the do-it-all that weighs 50 pounds, how far can you walk? Have you tried it? Have you gone out and because you get a few miles underneath it, and it's like, man, I really don't need half the stuff that's in here.
Well, I also come back to kind of the BUD/S analogy too. Like before I was going to into the Navy, and when I knew I was going to BUD/S to try to become a SEAL, which that never happened. Hopefully everybody understands my second phase story of getting rolled out on a dive injury, but just thought I'd throw that out there. Feel like I always have to.
Yeah.
So when I was training for that, and I was building up my physical fitness level, it empowered me mentally, just because I knew that I could overcome obstacles that were thrown in my way. And people say that BUD/S is 90% mental, and it's very true. But that physical fitness level gives you that mental ability to know.
Feed off each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then comes nutrition. That's number 2. And I've really been getting into this myself in the last year. Hopefully you guys have heard my stories about, following the Wire to Eat program and, Kelly and I kind of getting back on track with what we're eating and, how we've reduced cravings and are eating less and more healthy and things like that. I feel like that really plays into overall fitness as well. And it's one side of it's one side of the coin on a double-sided coin. If physical fitness and nutrition are kind of together like that, it's something that I wasn't necessarily neglecting, but I thought I was doing better than I was, if that makes sense. I thought my weight was somewhere in a healthy range. It was, it averaged about 5 pounds over where I thought I needed to be, but really there was a lot more I could be doing. And, we thought we ate pretty healthy, which, we kind of did, but we still didn't understand the balance of, carbs and fat and things like that too. So that program really helped us to do that. And now we're, a year into it and we've completely changed the way we eat, and it's a new lifestyle, and we don't plan on ever going back.
It's like breaking down the science of it. That's something that I think a lot of people don't consider is like there's input, output, reasonings and stuff like that. Like you said, he talks about in the book.
And then finally, we come to situational awareness / mindset. I think that both of those kind of tie in together, and mindset really is number one, and that's why I listed it first and foremost. I think if you're not prepared mentally for a situation you wind up in, you're not prepared at all. So the skills, I think, are worthless without the mental acuity to know what to do in certain situations and, have the motivation and desire to want to get out of that and understand, how to.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I define that too. And then, mindset, I think also really plays into situational awareness, and the reason I have that word in there is because I think it is that important. I mean, if you see threats coming at you, that's just more time you have to prepare a plan for what you're going to do and how you're going to act. What you're going to do with your family, how you're going to get them to safety. But you won't, if you don't see the threat coming, you're not going to have that time, and that's really important. Which goes back to the whole reason I back into a parking spot, or I sit facing the door in a restaurant, or I know where the exits are, I know where the hard points are. It's just
tiny little advantages.
Yeah, it's little advantages like that I think give you the edge in a situation like that. And thankfully, I've never wound up in something like that, but I am prepared if something does happen. So, yeah. Do you have anything to add? Situational awareness?
No, I agree. I think it's just and one of the things is that you may avoid situations that you don't realize because you headed off early. If I'm being followed on the interstate, I'll just take the next exit. And if they don't follow, okay, maybe something would have developed if we kept going, but I don't know, because the first thing I did is like, okay, I don't like this. I'm going to remove myself.
Yeah.
And, sometimes backing down or changing up, or if you see something weird in a restaurant, you get up and you say, hey, we're done. Let's go ahead and leave. Maybe you got out before something happened. It's just tough to quantify that kind of stuff. So you never know. And I would always err on the side of caution and rather have gone the long way around or done something like that to eat up a little bit of time than have to deal with something, if I can avoid it.
I completely agree with that.
Just keeps you safer and just overall better. And it's like knowing when to build a fire.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, something's changed. This is not good. Let's go ahead and get a fire started.
Yeah. No, completely agree.
Yeah.
That's a large part of the mindset too, is just knowing when to use these skills and how they come into play. And then, back to the situational awareness thing real quick. It's also, obviously seeing those threats coming at you. If you have your head buried in a phone, you're not going to. And that's something that I feel like is important to say every time we talk about situational awareness, because most people do have their heads buried in the phone. And I'm guilty of that too. I'm not saying I'm perfect. It's something I do try to work on as hard as I can. Even when I'm at home, Kelly loves to give me crap about being on my phone at home, and I'm a compulsive addict for work.
Checker.
Yeah. And it's just because we own a business, we have a lot riding on it, and where is that threat going to come from? Well, it's going to come through email, and I'm going to know that the server's down or something like that. Yep. So I get it.
It's a balance.
It's a double-edged sword and a balance, but that's kind of my philosophy, I guess, a little bit behind that. But I try to really focus on not doing that when I'm out in public, because I don't want to miss that visual cue that something's going wrong. I want to know exactly if I'm with people where they're at, and I want to have that, eye contact more than likely. So, yeah, I think it's very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's our top 10 skills. If you have anything to add to the conversation or skills you thought we neglected or comments on order or placement, please feel free to leave them in the comments on the YouTube video if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, or again on itstactical.com in the comments there on the article that'll go along with the podcast. And again, we're going to put a bunch of episode intel links in there, so you can find that on the website article, and you can find that on the show notes in the podcast as well.
Delve more into each one.
But, obviously all these are very, very important to us. These are all covered on the site. We have, almost 10 years of content now on itstactical.com dealing with these very same skills. So it's a wealth of information. Check it out, itstactical.com. All right, thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. Remember, you can use the pound tag Gear Tasting on any social media network. We will find your questions and answer them here on the show. We are trying to have more readily available question episodes, so they're coming.
Them in.
Yep. And we'll answer anything that has to do with like the skills you heard today, or that was kind of weird. Yeah,
just
literally
ask
anything.
Anything.
That also reminds me, funny thing is, the reviews that are coming in, please keep leaving them. We really enjoy reading them. Hopefully it's a 5-star review you're leaving us. We would very much appreciate it. It allows iTunes to show our podcast to new people and get them out to different genres that they wouldn't otherwise go in unless we have a good rating. So very much appreciate your help with that. And again, in that episode intel, we'll have a link to our crew leader membership and details how you can become a crew leader. That's our way of getting support from our audience, but allowing us to give you back something in return as well. We've got a lot of great benefits for that membership. So thanks again. See you next week.